Good morning and welcome to day 4 of our MCA review. Today we are going to be talking about distance formula and solving equations and inequalities. But first we're going to start off with distance formula. So again, this is something new. We are going to be finding the distance from one point on a line to the other. Now this is different than slope. The slope is the rate of change. The distance is just from one point to the other. So what distance formula is D stands for distance, equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So once we include our numbers here, that will give us our distance from this point to this point. Then over here we have our slope equation. So we're going to find slope as well. So first of all, we need to look at our points. We have -6, 1 and 3, 6. If you remember about our points, the x always comes first, then the y. Just like on this one, the x will come first and then the y. And what we need to do is figure out an x1 and an x2 and a y1 and a y2. Well, let's say this -6, 1 is our first point, so this one's going to be x1 and y1. Then this will be our second point, so x2 and y2. So now we can just plug in these numbers for our x2 and x1 and y2 and y1. So what we're going to have is D equals the square root of x2 minus x1. Well, x2 we said was 3, so we're going to have a 3 minus our x1, which we said was -6. So we have a -6. Now we put a squared sign there. Now if we have two negatives in a row, we can make that positive. Now we're going to add y2 minus y1. y2 is 6 minus y1, we said was 1. And then we have a squared sign on top of that. So what we need to do first is we need to do everything inside our parentheses. So we have D, for distance, equals the square root of, inside our parentheses, 3 plus 6. So 3 plus 6 then is 9. And we still have a squared sign above that. Plus 6 minus 1, which is 5. And we have a squared sign above that. So now we have to do, after our parentheses, we have to do our exponents. So the square root of 9 squared, which is 81, plus the square root of, or I mean not the square root, 5 squared, which is 25. So now we need to find the square root of 81 plus 25. Now when we find the square root of 81 plus 25, we just need to add up 81 and 25, and we get 106. So we are finding the square root of 106. Now we have to put that into our calculator. The square root of 106 is 10.3 about. So the distance from this point to this point is 10.3 units. Now if we put the same thing into our slope equation, we again have to look at what our y2 is. We said our y2 is 6. y2 minus y1, our y1 is 1. Then we have to look at our x2 minus x1. x2 is 3 minus negative 6, and two negatives make a positive. So what we get then is 6 minus 1, which is 5, and 3 plus 6, which is 9. So our slope is 5 over 9, or 5/9. This is different than our distance. Our distance down here was 10.3 units. Our slope was 5 over 9. So don't let that confuse you if you're trying to find distance or slope. Next one, we just are given 2 points. So the first thing we need to do is we need to label them x1 and x2 and y1 and y2. Well, this first one we know is x, just like this 8 would be x. So the first x we have is x1, the second x we have is x2. Then we have a y and a y. The first y we have is y1, the second y we have is y2. So now we have an x1, an x2, a y1, and a y2. So we need to find our distance first. So d equals the square root of x2 minus x1. Our x2 is 8 minus our x1, which is negative 2. Two negatives in a row make a positive, and we have a squared above that. Now we're going to add our y2 minus y1. Our y2 is negative 7 minus our y1, which is negative 3. Two negatives in a row make a positive, and put a squared above that. So first of all, do the parentheses. D equals the square root of 8 plus 2, which is 10, squared, plus negative 7 plus 3, which is negative 4 squared, so our distance equals the square root of 10 squared plus negative 4 squared. 10 squared is 100. 10 times 10 is 100. Plus negative 4 squared. Negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. So 100 plus 16. Now to find d, it's the square root of 100 plus 16, so 116. So d equals the square root of 116, which is 10.77. About 10.77 if we round it. So that is our distance from negative 2, negative 3 to 8, negative 7. Now over here, we are looking for our y2 again, which was negative 7, minus our y1, which is negative 3. Two negatives make a positive. Two negatives in a row make a positive. Now our x2 is 8 minus our x1, which is negative 2. Two negatives in a row make a positive. So our answer then for our slope is negative 7 plus 3, which comes out to be negative 4, over 8 plus 2, which is 10, Now we can simplify this by taking out taking out 2 from each of these. And what we get is negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So our slope is negative 2/5, or negative 2 over 5. So that's distance formula and slope. Now we're going to move on to so now we're doing equations and inequalities. So first one we need to look at is this one. We have a over negative 5 is greater than or equal to 11. So this one's going to be an inequality because it has this symbol. So what we're going to do is try to get a by itself. So a divided by negative 5. We have to undo division, which is multiplication, and we're going to multiply by negative 5. So then we get a. When we multiply or divide by a negative number, we need to flip our symbol. Remember, that's just a rule we need to know. When we multiply or divide by a negative number, we flip our symbol. So we're going to have a is less than or equal to negative 55. Over here we have an equation because we have an equal sign instead of an inequality symbol. So we need to get g by itself. So we're going to subtract 11 first because that's the opposite of add. And what we get then is 2g, because our 11s cancel out, equals 25 minus 11, which is 14. Now we have 2 times g, so we're going to divide by 2. And we get g equals 14 divided by 2, which is 7. Our next problem, we have variables on both sides. We have m's on both sides. This one is an inequality because there's a less than symbol. Now when we're solving this, we always want to get our variable to the left side. So we need to create a variable side and a constant side. The variable side should always be on the left. So we need to move this 4m over to our 8m. So because this 4m is positive, we're going to subtract 4m. So then we get 8m minus 4m, which is 4m. And we need to move our constant over to our constant side. So if we have a minus 7, we're going to add 7. So what we get then is those cancel out. Those will cancel out. 5 plus 7 is 12. Now we have 4m is less than 12. Well, we have to divide by 4 to get m by itself. And what we get is m is less than 12 divided by 4, which is 3. Our next problem is an equation because there's an equal sign. We have two variables, but they're on the same side, so we can combine like terms because they're both d, so we can combine them together to make one. 4d minus 2d gives us 2d minus 3 equals negative 15. So now we need to add 3 because it's the opposite of minus 3. So we get 2d equals negative 12. And we need to divide 2. And divide 2 to get d by itself. D equals negative 12 divided by 2, negative 6. Alright, our next problem, we have parentheses and a number outside of those parentheses. So remember, that means to distribute. So what we're going to do then is we're going to draw our box. We have negative 7 out in front because it's out in front of our parentheses, and p minus 12 on top. So negative 7 times p is negative 7p. Negative 7 times negative 12 is 84, positive 84. These two negatives make a positive, which is greater than or equal to negative 14. So we have negative 7p plus 84 is greater than or equal to negative 14. So we're going to subtract 84 from both sides because it's a positive. So those will cancel out. What we're left with is negative 7p is greater than or equal to negative 14 minus 84, so negative 98. Now divide by negative 7, divide by negative 7. What we're left with is p. We divided by a negative number, so we need to flip our sign. And negative 98 divided by 7 is 14. So p is less than or equal to 14. Two negatives make a positive 14. Alright, now we're going to solve these inequalities and graph our solution. So the first problem is an AND inequality. So we are going to draw two lines straight down from our symbols. Now what we have in the middle here is distributive property. So we need to draw a box. And we get 5 on the outside, 3p minus 2 on top. 5 times 3p is 15p. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. So we have 15p minus 10 in the middle. We bring our sides down. We have negative 15 and 20. Now we look at the middle, and we need to get p by itself in the middle. We're solving the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 10. What we do in the middle here, we need to do to both sides. So we're going to add 10 to both sides. So what we get here is negative 15 plus 10, negative 5, is less than 15p, which is less than 20 plus 10, which is 30. So our p is still not by itself, so we need to divide by 15, and divide by 15 on both sides. So negative 5 divided by 15 gives us a negative 1/3, which is less than p, which is less than 30 divided by 15, which is 2. So we're not quite done. We have to still graph our solution. So we need to make a number line and graph these. So what we're going to do is we are going to split this up into two problems. The first problem will be here. So it will be negative 1/3 is less than p. Now our variable can never be on the right. It has to be on the left. So we need to flip everything. So now p is going to be greater than negative 1/3. Our second problem is right here. p is less than 2. So if we draw our number line, our negative 1/3 is smaller than 2, so we put it on the left side. It's a greater than symbol, not a greater than or equal to, so it's an open circle pointing to the right. And our 2 is going to be another open circle, but this time it's pointing to the left, so our arrows will be touching in the middle. So it's an and inequality. Alright, we got one more problem. This one is an or inequality. So what we need to do is we need to solve these two problems separate. First thing we got to do is we need to move this 6. We're going to move the 6 over. So what we're left with then is 16 plus 6, which is 22, is less than negative x. Now, this negative x is like saying it's a negative 1x. So what we need to do is divide by negative 1 to get x by itself. So what we get then is negative 22. When we divide by a negative number, we have to flip our sign. So negative 22 is greater than x. Now we're still not done. The x can never be on the right side, so we need to flip it again. So this time we have x is less than negative 22. So our answer to our first problem is x is less than negative 22. Our next problem, we need to subtract 5 right away. So we get 11 minus 5, which is 6. And 2x is what's left. So now we divide by 2 to get x by itself. And we get x is greater than or equal to 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So if we draw our number line to graph this, our lesser number is negative 22, and that's an open circle. So an open circle at negative 22. Our arrow then is pointing to the left, so we draw an arrow to the left. And our greater than one is 3. This one is a closed circle because it's got a line underneath it. So draw a closed circle at 3. And this arrow is pointing to the right. So we have arrows pointing away from each other. So it's an or inequality.